You're listening to a New York Jets episode of the Jacob Valk Show. He's breaking down the team's latest goings-on as only he can. Follow him on Twitter @RealJacobValk. Here he is, Jacob Valk.
Hello, Jets fans! Welcome to my 2022 New York Jets offseason preview here on the Jacob Valk Show. I am the Jacob Valk, except no imitation. I like to start my off-season previews with a season recap. The Jets had a weird season. It was a season that you didn't expect anything, and you were okay with that because the whole season was about Zack Wilson's development. Letting Zack Wilson play, letting him take his lumps, letting him learn the ropes in order to become the best player he can be. I mean, early on, this season looked like it was going to be a disaster. They started out 1-5. They had gotten embarrassed by the Patriots twice. They'd gotten shut out by the Broncos. Sam Darnold beat them the first week of the season in the ultimate embarrassment. The quarterback that you trade away beats you right after you trade him. I mean, come on. That's terrible. Then to add injury to insult, Wilson gets hurt during the Patriots game. Mike White comes in, and the Jets are forced to play a backup quarterback for 4 weeks. In those 4 weeks, though, something interesting happened. The team actually didn't play poorly on offense. Defensively, they struggled. There's no question about that. But Mike White was fantastic against the Bengals. He was on his way to having a really good game against the Colts. Then he got hurt. Josh Johnson came in and all in all wasn't bad. Threw for over 300 yards, threw 3 touchdowns. It wasn't the greatest performance I've ever seen from a quarterback, but hey, Johnson wasn't bad. Then White gets embarrassed against the Bills. Joe Flacco starts against the Dolphins. Because for some reason we don't trust Mike White to play against a blitz-heavy defense. Probably the stupidest reason you can give to not start White. It's not that Flacco was bad, it was just a stupid reason to not start Mike White. White should have started. Didn't really matter because the Jets got the loss. Wilson came back against the Texans, got the win, and immediately looked more comfortable in the Jets system. That injury, sitting back and learning the ropes, really helped him. Sometimes you need that in life. Sometimes you need to just take a step back, absorb everything, see how things are supposed to be done, and then you go in and execute. And Wilson had a solid end to the season. He was good against the Eagles, was dreadful against the Saints, no question about that, but wasn't terrible against the Dolphins, was really good against the Jaguars, was really good against the Buccaneers, but did nothing against the Bills, but that wasn't his fault. No weapons and no O-line. Did Zack Wilson have a perfect end to the season? The answer is no. Did the Jets have a good end to the season? The answer is no. Did the Jets have a good season? The answer is no. But hopefully, you saw enough in the Dolphins, Jaguars, Buccaneers, and Bills games to make you realize that this team does have some building blocks. You know, at the end of the day, if Zack Wilson had looked as bad as he looked early in the season for the whole year, we'd have an interesting conversation about what the Jets would look to do at quarterback. That's how bad Wilson was looking. But he showed improvement, made smarter decisions. He didn't throw a single interception in his last 5 games. He only turned the ball over once. It was a lost fumble. You see the talent, you see the potential, you see the arm strength, you see the accuracy. Zack Wilson has all the tools to be a franchise quarterback. Can you be 100% sold on him going forward? The answer is no. But I don't think you can be 100% sold on any of the second-year quarterbacks. Definitely not Lawrence. Definitely not Lance. Definitely not Fields. And do you really think that Mac Jones is going to top out as anything more than a game manager? He'll never be great. I'm not 100% sold on him. I know you don't care if you're a Patriots fan. You'll take a win however you can get it. And you'll take a playoff berth however you can get it. But I'm not 100% sold on Jones. I'll tell you that right now. It's okay for Zack Wilson to not be a finished product. There's a saying in the NFL that the best thing a rookie quarterback can do is become a sophomore quarterback. Now that Wilson is taking his lumps, he's got to get better. The onus is now on the New York Jets to do what they failed to do with Sam Darnold. Put a supporting cast around him that is capable of making the playoffs. I understand you draft a quarterback second overall. The only thing that you can do that year is watch him develop. And at the end of the day, Wilson got better as the season progressed. That's all you can ask for. The 4-13 record is disappointing. There's no question. If you doubled the number of wins that the Jets had this year, and you made them 8-9, the Jets would still be in last place in the AFC East. You can't say that about any other team that finished last in their division. That they'd still be in last. But all you wanted to see was progress. You saw it from a lot of people. You saw it from Wilson. You saw it from Michael Carter. You saw it from Elijah Moore. You saw it from the young corners. You saw it from Mike LaFleur. Now that you have the ship pointed in the right direction, and you don't have a scrub at quarterback, how do you get this team back to the playoffs? Or at the very least, in playoff contention? Because at the end of the day, to expect this team to go from worst to first is an impossible ask. To expect this team to go from worst to a wildcard team is a very tough ask. If the Jets go 7-10, 8-9, 9-8, somewhere around there and miss the playoffs, I wouldn't bang tables over that. But the bare minimum of what I'd consider a successful season next year would be 7-10. That at least puts you in the playoff hunt for a while. It'll show that the young guns are getting better, and you'll be on the right path. But part of getting on the right path involves getting rid of players that are holding you back, that just don't have what it takes to succeed in the NFL. The Jets have a lot of players under contract that really need to be cut. I'll go alphabetically. That means that I'll start with Ashton Davis, the Jets' first third-round pick in not this past draft, but the draft before. He started 10 games last year, really did not play well. You watch him play, he just looks lost. It does not look like he has what it takes to be a good NFL player. If you had to pick one position on a dreadful defense that was the worst for the Jets, it would be safety. It wouldn't be linebacker. It would be safety. Davis was a big part of that. When Marcus May got hurt, Davis just couldn't step up. I've got to punish him for that. I don't like him. I don't think he's a good player. The Jets need to move on from him. Isaiah Dunn is a guy that the Jets were really high on. When the draft ended, they made signing him a big priority. They gave him one of the richest contracts that an undrafted free agent has ever gotten. And he did not look good. He started one game against the Dolphins. He got torched. I'm all about getting rid of the dead weight. I'm all about getting rid of the guys that don't have a spot on a good football team. Isaiah Dunn is that guy. You want to tell me it's unfair to move on from young players so quickly? No, I disagree with that. One thing that the Jets did last year was give a ton of young players a real chance to show what they can do. And you think about guys like Jason Pinnock when he moved to safety, Quincy Williams, Bryce Hall, Bryce Huff, and guys like that. They've earned a spot on this team going forward. The young players that didn't work out, guys like Davis and Dunn, you've got to move on from them. Just because they're young doesn't mean that they've earned a spot on this team. It's better to cut your losses than to keep sinking resources into a sunk cost. Chuma Edoga was a Mike Maccagnan draft pick. mainly because he blocked for Sam Darnold at USC. Edoga has done nothing in the NFL. You wonder why the Jets are so bad? I'll tell you why the Jets are so bad. It's because they don't hit on their later draft picks. Alright, fine. You drafted some good first-rounders. Congratulations. What about the second round? What about the third round? What about the fourth round? Etc., etc. You can't just hit on your first-rounders and say that's it. You've got to build up quality depth. The seminal reason that the Jets went 4-13 was their dreadful depth. When the injury bug hit, the Jets were ill-prepared to deal with that. And you had players being forced into positions that they never should have been in. Dan Feeney just isn't a good player. Connor McDermott is not a good player. Del'Shawn Phillips is not a good player. Nathan Shepard is not a good player. Sherrod Niesman is not a good player. One thing that the Jets really need to focus on this offseason is improving their depth at all positions. The next guy on my list is George Fant. Let me just say right now that George Fant had a really good year last year. Filled in incredibly well for Mikhail Beckton. Had a 71.1 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. It was nice to see him right the ship. The thing is, though, he's due to count for over $10 million against the cap next year. If he stays with the Jets, he's staying as a backup. I'm not paying a backup offensive tackle over $10 million. So I want him cut, but I do want the Jets to bring him back. You can cut someone and then bring them back on a lower salary. That's done all the time. Mikhail Beckton's going to be back next year, so he's starting at left tackle. I'm more than happy to keep Fant. I just want him back on a backup's contract. Ryan Griffin had one really good year with the Jets. It was his first year. He caught 5 touchdowns in 13 games. It looked like he was a keeper. The Jets signed him to a big extension. And then after that, he just fell off a cliff. I mean, this year he only had 27 catches for 261 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was not a good blocker. You could do a lot better than Ryan Griffin as your starting tight end. I want the Jets to totally overhaul tight end. And that starts by getting rid of Ryan Griffin. Justin Hardy was a good special teamer last year. I have no complaints with him whatsoever. The thing is, though, the Jets have done this for a while. They've overpaid for solid special teamers. Like guys who are just going to make an impact on special teams and nowhere else. You can find guys who are impact players on special teams, but can also contribute in other areas. I don't want Justin Hardy back. That's $2 million that can be better spent. Braden Mann is not a good punter. You can usually count on him for a shank per game. You can do a lot better than him. He's really not that good. I'd rather draft another punter. There's not much I can say about Mann. He's a punter. He's not a very good one. The Jets can do better. Denzel Mims is next on the list for obvious reasons. It's pretty scary that with all the injuries that the Jets had at wide receiver, that Mims only had 8 catches this year. Remember last year we were raving about him? Like that middle stretch of the season when he was really, really good. And it was like, whoa, okay, the Jets have something here. This is awesome. He never seemed to click with the new coaching staff. Wasn't comfortable with the system. If I'm another team in need of a 4th wide receiver, I'd call the Jets about Mims. I'd give up like a conditional 5th for him. He's 24. His story isn't completed yet, but it's clear as day that he's not going to work out with the Jets. So if you can trade him, do it. If you can't, cut him. He's a sunk cost under this new coaching staff. La'Mical Pirine is just buried on the depth chart. Remember his rookie season when he actually looked solid? Like you actually thought he could turn into something halfway decent? Yeah, that has really gone the way of the dodo. The Jets have 3 running backs all under contract that are better than Pirine. Michael Carter, Ty Johnson, and Austin Walter. So get rid of Pirine. He's just a sunk cost. Say what you want about this draft with Wilson, AVT, Moore, Carter, etc., etc. But Douglas's first draft was absolutely putrid. Mikhail Beckton got hurt. God only knows how he's going to look coming back. Denzel Mims is going to be off the team next year. Ashton Davis is going to be off the team next year. Jabari Zuniga was cut. Then he was brought back, but the Jets aren't counting on him to be anything. Pirine's going to be off the team next year. James Morgan's now on the practice squad. He was cut, ended up with the Panthers. Then the Jets brought him back. Cameron Clark hasn't played at all since entering the NFL. Bryce Hall is really good, don't get me wrong, but Braden Mann should be off the team next year. So there's only one player out of those 9 that I can slam my fist on the table for and say that they can be a part of the next good Jets team. You want to tell me Beckton deserves to be mentioned as one of those guys also? Let's see how he comes back from the devastating injury first. I'm not giving up on Beckton. I like Beckton. He's going to start next year, and I think he'll be really good, but it's not a guarantee. Sheldon Rankin's had an absolutely terrible season. You gotta wonder why Joe Douglas made it a priority to sign him, but he did nothing with the Jets. Had a 46.4 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. I understand that Robert Saleh likes to rotate his defensive linemen, but you gotta find someone better than Sheldon Rankins. He's just not a good player. You can do a lot better than Greg Van Roten as your starting right guard. He is just not a good pass blocker. I understand that he's a local kid. I'm pretty sure he grew up rooting for the Jets. And I loved it when the Jets signed him. I thought it made perfect sense. But he just had a really bad year. Did not have a great year last year. Not a well-rounded player. Again, you can do better than Greg Van Roten. I'm sick and tired of settling for okay. I want good. I want very good. I want great. This is the Jets' moment to make a big leap. They've got to seize this opportunity. And Trayvon Wesco just really isn't that good. I mean, he's just not a good player. He's not a great blocking tight end. The Jets have tried him at fullback. It really hasn't worked. He's not a good pass-catching tight end. The tight end position is really important for a young quarterback. That's his safety valve. That's the guy we can dump the ball off to and get positive yards. The Jets did not do a good job at all in giving Wilson weapons at tight end. Kenny Yeboah looks like he's going to be a decent player, but nothing spectacular. I promise you, I'm going to have the Jets upgrade tight end. So now let's get into the players that the Jets should bring back. Again, I'll go alphabetically. I'll start with everyone's favorite Jet, Braxton Barrios. What a great end to the season this guy had. He had 4 games where he looked like a really good receiver, had the big kick return touchdown. He actually led the NFL in yards per kick return this year. Let me tell you, Braxton Barrios should have been a Pro Bowler. That's how good he was. Solid player. There's a role on this team for him going forward. He's a depth receiver / special teams ace. The Jets need to bring him back. Foley Fatukasi looks like he can be a good defensive tackle for the Jets going forward. I understand that he didn't have a great end to the season, but early on he was really good. I mean, this guy is very talented. Has been a very underrated player on the Jets for a long time. He's 26 years old. I think there's a role for him on this team going forward. And I'll be honest with you, I'd have no problem with him starting. None whatsoever. Let him be the starting defensive tackle next to Quinnen Williams. I have no problem with that at all. I like Fatukasi. Very underrated player. Marcus May's season was sadly cut short by injury, but he's shown enough in his Jets career that he deserves to be back. He's the longest tenured Jet. Just a very good player, does his job day in and day out. I really like him. There comes a point when you need to start paying your drafted players. Alright, for too long, it's been draft and trade instead of draft, develop, and re-sign. You think about all the young guns that the Jets have gotten rid of recently. Robbie Anderson, Sam Darnold, Jordan Jenkins, Jamal Adams, Leonard Williams. It doesn't matter whether it was the right decision or not to get rid of those guys. It's just not a good look when you keep getting rid of your highly drafted players. In the case of Robbie Anderson, a very good young wide receiver. Bring Marcus May back, pay him whatever he wants. He's a really good player. You saw the impact of his absence as the year went on. The Jets need to bring May back. If they're going to bring back any free agent, let it be Marcus May. Morgan Moses was an excellent free agent signing by Joe Douglas. He signed late in the offseason and had a really good year. 70.9 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. You've got to wonder what Washington was thinking when they got rid of him. It's nice to see the Jets benefiting from another team's stupidity as opposed to another team benefiting from the Jets' stupidity. I really like Morgan Moses, and continuity on the O-line is important. So, that's another good reason to bring Moses back. And Eddie Pinheiro seems to have solved the Jets' kicking woes. Matt Amendola failed miserably. Alex Kessman failed miserably. Pinheiro came in and only missed one extra point. That was it, and it didn't come back to bite the Jets. The missed extra point was against the Jaguars. The Jets won 26-21. Pinheiro looks like he's a good kicker. Bring him back. Sign him to a 1-year deal. I'm confident in Pinheiro. I really am. All other pending unrestricted free agents can leave. All these moves will leave the Jets with over $60 million in cap room. And that's counting very, very generous contracts to Barrios, Fatukasi, May, Moses, and Pinheiro. 60 mil seems very, very conservative. It could be over 65 mil. In fact, it may even be 70 mil. The Jets have the resources to be players in free agency. And the trade market, too, which Joe Douglas indicated at his end-of-season press conference. I'm not going to go too in-depth on potential trades. I want to wait and see what players may become available. There's one guy who I'm going to mention, but that's it as far as trade pieces go. If someone else becomes available and he's really, really good, yeah, I'll change my tune. But for now, it's only one guy. And he's at this position, wide receiver. There are a lot of really good potential wide receiver free agents this year. Can Corey Davis be a number one wide receiver? Not in a perfect world. I like Corey Davis. I don't think he's a bad player. But I think we can all agree that the Jets should add a true number one. Make the wide receiver core as lethal as you possibly can. There's nothing wrong with giving Zack Wilson a bona fide number one wide receiver. And I'll start with Devonte Adams. Arguably the second best wide receiver in the NFL right now. The best wide receiver is Cooper Kupp. Everyone else is playing for second. But Devonte Adams is an absolute beast. He's easily one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Had 123 catches last year for over 1,500 yards and 11 touchdowns. Yeah, you know that the Packers are going to move heaven and earth to try to bring him back, but they are in cap hell right now. According to OverTheCap.com, they are over $42 million over the cap at this very moment. So good luck paying Devonte Adams. Good luck being able to franchise tag him. There may be an opening for the Jets to throw a bunch of money at Devonte Adams. And he says, sure, I like the color green. I'll go play for the other NFL team that wears green. The Eagles wear green also, but when you think of green, you think of the Jets. Gang green. Chris Godwin is next up on the list. I want the Jets to sign one of these guys, and I'm going in order of preference. So if they can't sign Devonte Adams, sign Chris Godwin. If they can't get either one of those guys, sign the next person on the list, etc., etc. We've heard the rumor for a while that Godwin could leave in free agency. I'm not sure how likely it is because Jason Light does an excellent job of keeping the players that he needs to keep around. But if Godwin hits free agency, bring him to the Jets. He had 98 catches last year for over 1,100 yards and 5 touchdowns. He'd be an excellent addition to the Jets. It took Mike Williams a while to really find his niche in the NFL. Of course, he found it in advance of his free agent season. You notice how that always happens? But he was great last year. He had 76 catches for over 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns. The Chargers are going to have the cap room to bring him back. And I don't see the Chargers getting rid of him. I just don't see Tom Telesco letting such an important part of his offense go when Justin Herbert is still getting better. But stranger things have happened. It's worth mentioning Mike Williams as a possibility for the Jets. Christian Kirk is another guy that deserves to be mentioned. I understand that he's not the sexiest name in the world. And you can make the argument that he's not a true number one wide receiver, but he's really young. He's 25. He's been really consistent all throughout his career. Last year was his best season, 77 catches for just under 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns. You could do a lot worse than bringing in Christian Kirk. He's a very good player. Like I said, maybe not a sexy name, but he's a very good player. And the same thing holds for Russell Gage. I understand that if Gage was the marquee addition at wide receiver, Jets fans would be upset. But this guy's a good player. Alright, he's put together back-to-back 700-yard seasons. You know, he's been overshadowed for a while in Atlanta, playing with guys like Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley and Kyle Pitts and guys like that. He's a good player. Last year he had 66 catches for 770 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's going to turn 26 in 10 days. You could do worse than adding Russell Gage. If you're not crazy about him, might I suggest another Falcons wide receiver, Calvin Ridley. Now that wouldn't be a free agent signing. That would be a trade. Douglas said at his end of season press conference that he's open to being aggressive on the trade market. Calvin Ridley would make a ton of sense. Here's a guy who, not last year, but the year before, had 90 catches for 1,374 yards and 9 touchdowns. He is an excellent wide receiver. The thing is, though, the fact that he stepped away from football kinda concerns me. Like, I understand that you need to do what you need to do to preserve your mental health. Okay? And I applaud Ridley for being so open about it. And I'm not begrudging him for doing what he did. He needs to put himself first. But as a Jets fan, if I'm going to advocate for my team to trade for someone, I want to know that that person is all in on football, that has the mental strength to deal with a 4-month season. Not to mention playoffs, hopefully, the preseason, training camp, stuff like that. I like Ridley. I'm not begrudging him at all for stepping away from football, but it is something that you need to consider before you bang your fist on the table and say that the Jets should trade for Ridley. As I said earlier, tight end was a huge position of need last year. It's something that Douglas needs to address. There are a lot of good tight ends on the market. I'm only going to focus on the upper tier ones. And that list starts with Dalton Schultz. A guy who last year for the Cowboys had 78 catches for 808 yards and 8 touchdowns. He's one of the most underrated players in the game. Guys like Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup get the headlines. Meanwhile, Schultz goes out there every day and does his job. Very good player. He's young. He's 25. He'd make a ton of sense for the Jets. And the Cowboys are in cap hell, so I could see the Cowboys being forced to move on from him very, very easily. Mike Gesicki is a very talented tight end. Last year he had 73 catches for 780 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, as a Jets fan, I see him twice a year. I've always been impressed with him. Very good player. The touchdowns should be higher. I don't like the fact that he only has 13 in 4 years. I don't like that he only had 2 touchdowns. But 73 catches for 780 yards is nothing to sneeze at. Gesicki's young. He's 26. He was born in New Jersey. Obviously, he knows the AFC East. It could be a match made in heaven. The last guy on the list is Tyler Conklin. Not a very well-known name. It would probably make some people scratch their heads. But Conklin had a really good year last year. 61 catches for 593 yards and 3 touchdowns. It's kind of funny. The Vikings traded a 4th rounder to the Jets for Chris Herndon and a 6th. They expected Herndon to be their big tight end. They didn't realize what they had in Conklin. You'd have to love the irony if the Jets signed Conklin after stealing a 4th rounder from the Vikings. Just to put it in perspective, last year Herndon had 4 catches for 40 yards. That's it. Just to put a finer point on it, Tyler Conklin in a game against the Seahawks had 7 catches for 70 yards. So Conklin eclipsed what Herndon did in a season in one game. That brings us to cornerback. The Jets really need a lockdown corner. The young corners that the Jets have are good. All right, Bryce Hall should be back next year, and I'm fine with him starting. Michael Carter is a fine nickel corner. Brandon Echols is a fine fourth corner. But in a perfect world, the Jets would add another corner. Just add a shutdown guy who can limit the opposing team's best receiver. It would go a long way toward helping this Jets defense. And the guy at the top of the list has to be J.C. Jackson. This guy is incredible. Had an 82.7 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. Had 8 interceptions. Was the highest graded cornerback in single coverage this year by Pro Football Focus. His grade was 90.3. Jalen Ramsey was second. His grade was 84.8. The Jets need to offer Jackson the moon and the stars. It would be that important to get him and take him away from the Patriots. DJ Reed is a name that may be unfamiliar to you, but Robert Saleh knows him. He spent a couple years with Reed when Reed first came into the league with the Niners. Then in 2020, he went to the Seahawks. And he really turned it on. Like, he is a really good player. 78.6 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. I like the familiarity with Saleh's scheme. He's young. He's 25. Reed would be a very savvy get for the Jets. Now, speaking of savvy, what Brian Gutekunst did to bring in Rasul Douglas was savvy. Here's a guy who was out of the NFL to begin the season. The Packers bring him in, and he puts together an excellent season. 73.5 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. He had 5 interceptions, including the game-sealing one against the Cardinals in Week 8. You gotta wonder how so many teams passed on Douglas. You've gotta be really happy for him that he's positioned himself into getting a big contract in free agency. I'm not saying you give him a crazy contract, but he could come in and really help the Jets. I like Douglas a lot. Sidney Jones would also make sense. He did not work for the Eagles. Went to the Jaguars, didn't set the world on fire. Then he went to the Seahawks and really put it all together. Had a 70.2 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. He's very young. He's 25. You get the sense that he can still get better. Sidney Jones would be a good get for the Jets. Now, if you've noticed, I've been skewing younger with the free agents that I want the Jets to add. I don't think they need to sign a bunch of 30-year-olds to short-term deals. That's not the right way to go about it. But this guy, even at 32, is very, very good. I'm talking about Casey Hayward. There was a time when this guy was one of the best corners in the NFL. And maybe he's not at that tier right now, but he's still really, really good. 76 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. You had this sense that last year his best days were behind him. The Chargers moved on from him. He stayed in the AFC West and got a little bit of revenge against his old team. I like Hayward, very good player. And also he went to Vanderbilt, where my father went, so maybe I could convince him to get a Casey Hayward Jets jersey. Like I said before, safety was a huge hole for the Jets last year. Just because you're bringing Marcus May back doesn't mean that you shouldn't add another safety. It's all about depth. Alright, Jason Pinnock showed enough that I'd be comfortable with him starting, but there's enough of a chance that he was just a flash in the pan that I still want to add another safety. There's nothing wrong with saying to a guy like Pinnock, hey, you're the first guy up if there's an injury, and football's a violent game. You've got to be ready to go at a moment's notice. And you know what? Pinnock should sign up for that in a heartbeat. Now, there are a lot of really good safeties available. None better than Marcus Williams. This guy plays every game, is really good, had an 80.1 overall grade last year according to Pro Football Focus. I understand that when you hear the name Marcus Williams, you probably think of the Minnesota Miracle, the crazy catch by Stefon Diggs, a wild finish, but I promise you, Williams wouldn't let that happen now. One of the best safeties in the NFL. He'd make a ton of sense for the Jets. Jayron Kearse does everything that you want a safety to do. He's a thumper, he's a very good tackler, but he's also really good in coverage. Last year, according to Pro Football Focus, he had a 76.8 overall grade, a 76.2 coverage grade. That's how a strong safety should play, Jamal Adams. You should be able to do both. It took Kearse a while to hit his stride, but now that he seems to have hit it, he looks like a really good safety. He'd make a lot of sense for the Jets. Jordan Whitehead is really young, but really talented. Another guy who it took a while to find his niche. His first couple of years, he was really bad, but give Todd Bowles a ton of credit. As much as that kills me to say, he worked with Whitehead, and now he's a really good safety. Has a 74.9 overall grade, according to Pro Football Focus. Not as much of a thumper as Kearse, but very good in coverage. If you miss out on the crown jewel, Marcus Williams, you could do a lot worse than Jordan Whitehead. Very good player. The last guy up is Bobby McCain. Really good coverage safety. Has been around for a while. And while he doesn't set the world on fire, he does his job every game. Really good in coverage. Had 4 picks. 70.9 overall grade according to Pro Football Focus. 72.6 overall coverage grade. Ron Rivera did an excellent job with him in Washington. He knows the AFC East from being with the Dolphins for so long. Very good player. He's been good for a really long time. I like McCain a lot. At this very moment, the Jets will have 5 picks in the top 69. That's really nice. In last year's offseason preview, I didn't give you my preferred draft picks. Just because there were so many different variables with quarterbacks and the head coach and stuff like that. This year, it's a little easier to narrow down. So I will tell you who I would take with the first 5 picks that the Jets have if the draft was tomorrow. At 4, I want the Jets to take Nakobe Dean. Schematically, he is a perfect fit. When you watch him play, you see a linebacker that can go sideline to sideline, but can also shoot the gap when necessary. Reminds me a lot of Patrick Queen. ESPN has him as the 8th best player in this draft. I'd probably go a little higher than that. I'd probably put him 6. I think you'd be hard-pressed to think of a better fit for Robert Saleh's defense than Nakobe Dean. Now, you may have noticed that the Jets still have a hole at right guard. I didn't say that they should sign a right guard. Well, that's because Tyler Winderbaum is in this draft. Now, Winderbaum is a center. No question about that. I don't think he's strong enough to play guard. I don't think he has the hands for it. He's a center. But Connor McGovern can slide over to right guard. He can do that very easily. You want to tell me that you're not crazy about that? Since McGovern was so good last year at center, you don't want to fix what isn't broken. I understand that. The thing is, though, Joe Douglas loves really athletic offensive linemen. And Winderbaum is crazy athletic. I mean, if you were to write down on a piece of paper what Joe Douglas looks for in an offensive lineman, it would be Tyler Winderbaum. Very athletic, finishes his blocks, excellent balance, very smart. And not for nothing, but think about the left side of that O-line and center. You have a first-round pick in Mikhail Beckton, a first-round pick in Elijah Vera Tucker, and a first-round pick in Tyler Winderbaum. That's how you build up a great offensive line. That's how you put a young quarterback in the best position possible to succeed. Tyler Winderbaum makes perfect sense for the Jets at 10. At 35, I want the Jets to take the best tight end in this draft. Signing a guy like Schultz or Kasich or Conklin isn't enough. Having Kenny Yeboah isn't enough. The Jets need to draft Jaylen Wydermeyer. Some people will say that Trey McBride out of Colorado State is the best tight end in this draft. I disagree with that. I think Wydermeyer's better. Put together some really good years at Texas A&M. Obviously has the experience against elite competition in the SEC. 3-year starter, which I love. Just a tried and true receiving tight end. Checks all the boxes that you want in a receiving tight end. Not a good blocker. Okay, that is something that the Jets are going to need to work on with him. but Wydermeyer's ability as a pass catcher is so good that I'll be willing to live with those growing pains. I have the utmost confidence in Mike LaFleur. I'm very confident that he and Ron Middleton, the Jets' tight ends coach, who was technically the Jets' head coach during the Jaguars game, could turn Wydermeyer into a solid blocking tight end. At 38, I want the Jets to add another safety. I do not want what happened last year, where the Jets were pulling in guys off the street and starting them, to ever happen again. Alright, that cannot happen under any circumstances. Like I said, the key to this offseason for the Jets is going to be filling out their depth. How do they make it so when the injury bug hits, they're not up a certain type of creek without a paddle? Well, I'll tell you how they can do that by drafting the second best safety in this draft, Daxton Hill. Very, very good in coverage, very smart. That comes from his bloodlines. His brother is Justice Hill, Ravens running back. Not a great tackler. He just doesn't have the frame to be, a great tackling safety. He's 6 foot, 192 pounds. But, boy, I'll tell you. He can throw his body around. He's not afraid to get in there. Very, very good in coverage. Not the softest hands in the world, but he can knock balls down. I like Daxton Hill. Ton of talent there, ton of potential there. Like I said, second best safety in this draft. Finally, at 69, I want the Jets to take another wide receiver. Again, I don't want what happened last year to happen again, where the Jets were trotting out guys like Jeff Smith and DJ Montgomery and Tarek Black. That's not going to work. So draft a wide receiver. There's nothing wrong with adding a little depth. Nothing wrong with giving Zack Wilson another weapon in David Bell. He's not the fastest guy in the world. He's the kind of guy who, if you want to get a first down, you can count on Bell. He's an excellent route runner, freezes defenders, very good football IQ. And he's a big guy, 6'2", 205 pounds. I mean, think about this wide receiver core for a minute. Devonte Adams, Corey Davis, Elijah Moore, Braxton Barrios, and David Bell. It doesn't get any better than that. All in all, if everything breaks the Jets' way and they follow that blueprint, there's nothing stopping this team from making a serious playoff push next year. I'm optimistic about the Jets' future, but Joe Douglas needs to hit the ground running. Enough with waiting until next year. This is next year. Alright? Be aggressive and make some big moves. Regular episodes of The Jacob Valk Show come your way every weekday afternoon. Until next time, I'm Jacob Valk, and always remember, if you disagree with me, you're wrong.